I stood in the corner of my parents' living room, holding a glass of sparkling cider that had gone warm in my hand. The annual Chin family holiday party was in full swing. 70 relatives crammed into a house designed for 20, the smell of roasted duck and ginger mingling with expensive perfume and judgment. "Emily, dear, come here." Mom's voice cut through the noise. She was standing near the grand piano with Aunt Sarah, Uncle Robert, and a cluster of cousins I barely recognized. Her smile was bright and sharp as a scalpel. "Tell everyone about your new job." I'd been dreading this moment since I walked through the door 3 hours ago. "I work at Metropolitan Hospital," I said simply, keeping my voice neutral. "She's being modest." Mom laughed, that particular laugh that meant she was about to say something cutting disguised as affection. "She just answers phones at the hospital. Barely makes minimum wage, but we're proud she's finally employed after all that schooling." The way she said schooling made it sound like I'd wasted a decade finger painting. Aunt Sarah patted my arm with condescending sympathy. "At least it's honest work, dear. Not everyone can be successful like your brother." My brother David chose that moment to swagger over, fresh from closing a real estate deal he'd already mentioned 12 times that evening. At 32, he was the family's golden child, successful, charming, married to a lawyer, and absolutely insufferable. "Hey, Em." He clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to make me wince. "Still taking appointments at the hospital front desk? School. Someone's gotta do the grunt work, right?" "I don't actually work at the front desk," I started, but Mom was already talking over me. "We tell people she's in healthcare," Mom confided to Aunt Sarah in a stage whisper everyone could hear. "It sounds better than receptionist. Though honestly, after we spent all that money on her education, we thought she'd amount to more." I'd heard variations of this speech for the past 6 years. Ever since I'd stopped explaining what I actually did. It was easier to let them believe whatever they wanted than to watch them dismiss the truth. "Remember when she said she wanted to be a brain surgeon?" Uncle Robert chimed in, swirling his whiskey. "We all thought that was adorable." "Children have such wild dreams," Aunt Sarah sighed. "It's hard when they have to face reality." My cousin Jennifer, 3 years younger, recently promoted to assistant manager at a boutique, gave me a pitying look. "It must be hard, Emily. Seeing everyone else succeed while you're stuck answering phones. But hey, at least you have a job, right?" I took a sip of warm cider and said nothing. This was the Chin family dynamic I'd grown up with. Mom and Dad had immigrated from Taiwan with nothing, built a successful import business through brutal work and sacrifice, and expected their children to be doctors, lawyers, or executives. David had obliged by becoming a real estate mogul. I had disappointed them, or so they thought. "How much do hospital receptionists make anyway?" my cousin Marcus asked, genuinely curious. He was a software engineer at a startup. "Like 30,000 a year? If she's lucky," David said, laughing. "Most of those positions are minimum wage. No benefits, no advancement. Dead-end stuff." "We offered to get her a position at our company," Dad interjected, joining the circle with his usual air of disapproval. "Front office work. Better pay. But she insisted on this hospital thing." "I like healthcare," I said quietly. "Answering phones isn't healthcare, sweetie," Mom corrected. "That's administrative work. There's a difference." The pager in my purse vibrated. I ignored it. It was probably just another routine consult that one of my residents could handle. "The worst part," Mom continued, warming to her favorite topic, "is that we paid for all that fancy education. 7 years of university. And for what? So she could schedule appointments." 8 years, I corrected automatically. "And a fellowship." Mom waved her hand dismissively. Whatever it was expensive and apparently useless. "Maybe she wasn't smart enough for real medical work," Jennifer suggested, trying to sound sympathetic and failing. "Not everyone has the aptitude. At least she found something she can handle." My pager vibrated again. More insistent this time. "I mean, we love you, Em," David said in that way that meant the opposite was coming next. "But you gotta admit, working a desk job at 31 is kind of embarrassing. Most people have careers by now." "She's always been the practical one," Aunt Sarah said. "Not brilliant like David, but steady. That's important too." The pager wouldn't stop vibrating. I pulled it out discreetly and glanced at the screen. Code black. Presidential trauma. Chief of neurosurgery required immediately. cerebral aneurysm rupture. No other surgeons qualified. My blood went cold. Code Black was reserved for national security level medical emergencies. Precedential meant exactly what it sounded like. And cerebral aneurysm rupture meant someone very important was dying, and I had approximately 20 minutes to get to the hospital before brain damage became irreversible. Emily, are you even listening? Mom's voice was sharp with irritation. We're talking about your future. The least you could do is pay attention. I need to make a call, I said, already pulling out my phone. See? This is exactly what we mean, David said to the group. No focus. No ambition. Just coasting through life taking phone calls. I stepped away from the circle and dialed the direct line to the OR. Chin, I said the moment someone picked up. Status update. Now. Chief. The voice was Dr. Patel, one of my senior residents. He sounded terrified. We have POTUS's chief of staff incoming with a ruptured cerebral aneurysm. Happened at the state dinner downtown. Secret Service is bringing him in now. 7 minutes. Dr. Morrison tried to scrub in, but he's not cleared for this level of. I'm 20 minutes out, I interrupted, my mind already running through the procedure. Cerebral aneurysm rupture. High-profile patient. Massive political pressure. This was a surgery only 3 people in the country were qualified to perform, and I was the only one in this city. Prep or 1. Get neurology standing by. I want a full CT scan the second he arrives. Have anesthesia ready for immediate intubation. And get Dr. Martinez, she's cleared for presidential-level procedures. Chief. The Secret Service is asking for you specifically. Tell them I'm en route. And Patel? Nobody touches him until I get there. Nobody. I ended the call and turned back to my family. They were all staring at me with varying degrees of confusion. What was that about? Mom asked suspiciously. I have to go to the hospital, I said, already calculating drive time. 15 minutes if traffic was clear. 17 if I hit lights. Too long either way. See? This is what I mean, Mom said to Aunt Sarah. They call her in for overtime on Christmas Eve because she's just a receptionist. They don't respect her time. That's terrible, Jennifer agreed. You should stand up for yourself, Emily. Someone probably called in sick and they need her to cover the phones, David suggested. Typical entry-level stuff. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Metropolitan Hospital Executive Director. I answered. Dr. Chin. Emily, thank God. Director Harrison's voice was tight with stress. I know you're at a family event, but we have a situation. I'm sure your team briefed you. Ruptured cerebral aneurysm, Chief of Staff, presidential-level emergency. I rattled off. I'm leaving now. Have my team prep exactly as I ordered. I'll need the security protocols activated and the OR completely secured. The Secret Service is already here. They're asking for credentials verification. Tell them to check the National Security Clearance database. I'm cleared for Level 5 presidential medical procedures. And Harrison, get the media blackout in place. Nothing about this leaks until I say so. Already done. We're calling it a routine VIP admission. Good. I'll be there in 14 minutes. I hung up and looked at my family. They were all frozen, staring at me like I'd started speaking Martian. Emily, Mom said slowly, who were you just talking to? I really do have to go, I said, grabbing my coat. There's an emergency at the hospital. What kind of emergency? Dad demanded. What could a receptionist possibly? My phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized from the East Wing. I answered. Dr. Chin speaking. Chief Chin, this is Special Agent Morrison with the Secret Service. The voice was clipped and professional. We have a code black situation with a cabinet-level official. We need confirmation that you're en route and will be performing the procedure. Confirmed. I'm leaving my current location now. ETA Metropolitan Hospital is 13 minutes. The patient is not to be moved before I arrive, and I want a full security sweep of or one completed before I scrub in. Understood, Chief. We'll have an escort waiting at the hospital entrance. Your security clearance has been verified. Thank you, Agent Morrison. I ended the call and found my entire family staring at me in complete silence. Even David's mouth was hanging slightly open. Emily, Aunt Sarah said carefully, why did that person call you Chief? I have to go, I repeated, pulling on my coat. Someone's life depends on it. Wait. Mom's voice had lost its condescending edge. What do you actually do at that hospital? I paused at the door, considering my answer. For 6 years I'd let them believe whatever they wanted. I'd stopped correcting them when they called me a receptionist. I'd stopped explaining my research, my surgeries, my position. It had seemed easier than watching them dismiss everything I'd accomplished. But right now someone was dying. And I didn't have time for this conversation. Exactly what you think, I said. I work at the hospital. But that person called you chief, Jennifer said, confused. Chief of what? My pager went off again. Patient arriving. 2 minutes. CT scan shows massive hemorrhage. Critical status. I really have to go, I said and walked out the door. Behind me I heard David say, that was weird, right? Why would the Secret Service call a receptionist? I was already running to my car. The drive to Metropolitan Hospital took 11 minutes. I broke several traffic laws getting there, but the Secret Service had cleared the route and I had emergency authorization. My phone rang 3 more times during the drive. Dr. Martinez confirming she was scrubbed and ready, Director Harrison updating me on the patient's deteriorating condition, and my department administrator asking if I needed anything. I pulled into the executive parking area where a Secret Service agent was waiting. He verified my identity, checked my credentials against a tablet, and escorted me through a side entrance that bypassed the main hospital entirely. The secure elevator took us directly to the surgical floor. The patient is critical, Dr. Chin, Agent Morrison said as we walked rapidly through the corridors. We understand you're the only surgeon in the region with the clearance and expertise to perform this procedure. I'm aware, I said, my mind already in surgery mode. Everything else, my family, their comments, their assumptions, had vanished the moment I got in the car. Right now there was only the procedure, the patient, and the clock ticking down. We reached the surgical prep area. Dr. Martinez was already there, gowned and gloved. Chief, she said, relief flooding her face. Patient is in CT now. Scan shows a ruptured anterior communicating artery aneurysm with significant subarachnoid hemorrhage. Blood pressure is dropping. We've got him intubated and sedated, but he's circling. Time since rupture? Approximately 37 minutes. I cursed silently. That was pushing the edge of the window. Every minute that passed meant more brain damage, more risk of catastrophic stroke. Prep him for immediate craniotomy, I ordered, scrubbing in. I want propofol for anesthesia maintenance and get the neurophysiology monitoring set up. If there's any change in brain activity during the procedure, I need to know immediately. Yes, Chief. The scrub nurse helped me into my surgical gown while I continued rattling off instructions. This was the part one loved. The absolute clarity of emergency medicine. No ambiguity. No politics. Just skill, knowledge, and the steady rhythm of surgical precision. CT images are up, Dr. Patel called from the monitoring station. I studied the scans while finishing my scrub. The aneurysm had ruptured catastrophically, bleeding into the subarachnoid space. The blood was putting pressure on critical brain structures. If I didn't relieve that pressure and clip the aneurysm in the next hour, the patient would suffer irreversible brain damage or death. Or, one is ready, the surgical coordinator announced. Let's move. I walked into the operating room where my team was assembled. Dr. Martinez as my primary assist, Dr. Patel monitoring neurology, 2 scrub nurses, an anesthesiologist, and a perfusionist standing by in case we needed to go on bypass. Around the perimeter, Secret Service agents stood at discrete stations, watching everything. The patient was already positioned, head immobilized in the cranial fixation device. Monitors beeped steadily, showing vital signs that were concerning but stable. All right, everyone, I said, positioning myself at the head of the table. This is a ruptured anterior communicating artery aneurysm in a 63-year-old male. Significant hemorrhage, moderate vasospasm. We're going to do a pterional craniotomy, evacuate the hematoma, and clip the aneurysm. Estimated procedure time is 4 to 5 hours. Questions? No one spoke. Good. Let's save a life. I held out my hand and the scrub nurse placed the scalpel into my palm. The surgery was intricate and demanding. Every move had to be precise. The brain tolerates no errors. I worked steadily, opening the skull, retracting tissue, navigating through the complex architecture of blood vessels and neural tissue. Dr. Martinez anticipated my needs perfectly, handing me instruments before I asked, suctioning blood to keep my field of view clear. 3 hours in, I finally visualized the aneurysm, a balloon of weakened blood vessel wall, ruptured and bleeding. Carefully, delicately, I isolated it from the surrounding tissue. "Clip," I said. The scrub nurse placed the titanium aneurysm clip into my hand. This was the critical moment. I had to position the clip across the neck of the aneurysm, cutting off blood flow without damaging any of the dozen critical vessels surrounding it. I placed the clip, checked the position, adjusted slightly, checked again. "Clip is secure," I announced. "Blood flow to the aneurysm is stopped. Dr. Patel, neurology readings. All normal, Chief. No changes in brain activity. Excellent. Let's evacuate the remaining hematoma and close." Another 90 minutes of meticulous work. Finally, I stepped back from the table. "That's it," I said. "Close him up, get him to neuro ICU and monitor him continuously for the next 48 hours. I want updates every 2 hours." "Yes, Chief," Dr. Martinez said. "Brilliant work as always." I stripped off my gloves and gown, suddenly aware of how exhausted I was. 5.5 hours of surgery, the emotional toll of the emergency, and before that 3 hours of my family's condescension. I stepped out of the OR and found Director Harrison waiting with a man in an expensive suit who could only be a high-ranking government official. "Dr. Chin," Harrison said, "this is Deputy Chief of Staff Richardson." "Mr. Richardson," I said, shaking his hand. "Your colleague came through surgery successfully. We'll know more in the next 48 hours, but I'm cautiously optimistic." "Dr. Chin, the President wanted me to thank you personally," Richardson said. "We understand you left a family event to perform this surgery. Your skill and dedication are appreciated at the highest levels." "Just doing my job, sir. The nation is fortunate to have surgeons of your caliber," he continued. "Your record speaks for itself. Chief of Neurosurgery at 31, youngest in the hospital's history. Over 300 successful brain surgeries. Published research in 7 major medical journals. The President specifically requested you when we learned about the aneurysm rupture." I nodded tiredly. "I appreciate that. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to check on my patient." It was nearly 3 in the morning when I finally left the hospital. The Chief of Staff was stable, showing positive neurological signs. Barring complications, he would make a full recovery. I drove back to my apartment, too exhausted to feel anything except the bone-deep weariness that comes after high-stakes surgery. My phone had been buzzing intermittently all night, texts and calls from my family that I'd ignored. I was about to silence it completely when I saw the number. Dad's cell phone. And then Mom's. And then David's. And then Aunt Sarah's. 43 missed calls. 67 text messages. Curious despite myself, I opened the messages. Emily, call me immediately. Why is the news saying Dr. Emily Chin, Chief of Neurosurgery, saved a government official? That can't be you. David, what the hell? Your name is all over the news. Jennifer, OMG, Emily, is that really you? CNN is calling you one of the country's top brain surgeons. Aunt Sarah, Emily dear, I think there's been a mistake. The news is saying you're a doctor? Dad, Emily, call your mother. No. I scrolled through the messages with a growing sense of unreality. Turned on my TV. And there it was. My face on CNN, a photograph from last year's American College of Surgeons conference. Dr. Emily Chin, Chief of Neurosurgery at Metropolitan Hospital, successfully performed emergency surgery on a senior government official tonight. Dr. Chin, only 31 years old, is considered one of the nation's leading neurosurgeons, specializing in cerebrovascular procedures. She completed her medical degree at Johns Hopkins, her residency at Massachusetts General Hospital, and a fellowship in neurosurgery at Stanford Medical Center. I turned off the TV. My phone rang. I answered. Emily. Her voice was strange, shaky, confused, nothing like her usual confidence. Emily, the news is saying you're a brain surgeon. That you're the chief of surgery at the hospital. Neurosurgery, I corrected. And yes, I am. Silence. But you said you worked at the hospital. I do work at the hospital. You let us think you were a receptionist. No, I said quietly. You told everyone I was a receptionist. I just stopped correcting you. Why would you, Emily? This doesn't make sense. If you're a surgeon, if you're the chief of surgery, neurosurgery, why wouldn't you tell us? I sat down on my couch, staring at the dark window. Do you remember 6 years ago? When I told you I'd been appointed chief of neurosurgery? Silence on the other end. I was 25. The youngest department chief in the hospital's history. I just published research that revolutionized how we treat aneurysms. I was so proud. So excited to tell you. I don't remember. You said it was a fancy title for a regular doctor. That David's real estate deal that week was more impressive. That I should focus on finding a husband instead of chasing career advancement. I heard her sharp intake of breath. After that, I stopped trying to explain. I continued. Every time I mentioned a surgery, you changed the subject. Every time I talked about my research, you made a comment about how I was wasting my time. So eventually I just let you believe whatever you wanted. It was easier. Emily, we didn't mean. You asked how much hospital receptionists make. I said. I make $470,000 a year plus research stipends. I own a condo downtown. I paid off my medical school loans 3 years ago. I have a successful career. I save lives. And none of that mattered to you because it didn't fit the narrative you'd already decided about me. We're your family, Mom said, and now her voice was definitely shaking. We love you. We just didn't understand. You didn't want to understand, I corrected gently. You wanted me to be disappointed and struggling so David could be the successful one. You needed me to be the family failure. That's not, Emily, that's not fair. Maybe not, I agreed. But it's true. And I'm too tired to argue about it right now. I just spent 5.5 hours performing brain surgery on a man who would have died without my expertise. I'm going to sleep. We can talk about this later. Emily, wait. I hung up. My phone immediately started ringing again. I turned it off. The next morning, I woke to find my apartment building surrounded by news vans. Apparently, saving the chief of staff's life during a Christmas Eve emergency had made me a minor celebrity. I ignored all interview requests, made coffee, and prepared to go back to the hospital to check on my patient. My building's doorman buzzed up. Dr. Chin, you have visitors in the lobby. Tell the press I'm not giving interviews. It's not the press, ma'am. Well, it's quite a lot of people. They say they're your family. I closed my eyes. Of course they were. Send them up. 5 minutes later, my entire family crowded into my living room. Mom, Dad, David and his wife Jennifer, Marcus, Aunt Sarah, Uncle Robert, and at least a dozen cousins I'd barely spoken to in years. They stood awkwardly in my entryway, taking in my condo. The modern furniture, the original artwork, the wall of medical textbooks and journals, the framed commendations from the American College of Surgeons, Johns Hopkins and Massachusetts General. Emily, Mom started. Before anyone says anything, I interrupted, I want to make something clear. I didn't tell you about my career because you made it obvious you didn't want to hear about it. Every time I tried, you dismissed it. So I stopped trying. We didn't know, Jennifer said weakly. You didn't ask, I countered. For 6 years, none of you asked what I actually did at the hospital. You just assumed. David ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. The things I said last night were unkind but honest, I finished. You all believed I was a failure because it was easier than recognizing my success. We're proud of you, Dad said gruffly. Are you? I asked. Because yesterday you were embarrassed by me. You told 70 relatives that I barely make minimum wage. You said my education was wasted. You said I wasn't smart enough for real medical work. Aunt Sarah had the grace to look ashamed. Emily, dear, we didn't understand. You didn't try to understand, I said. And that's the problem. Mom stepped forward. Emily, you're right. We're sorry. We should have listened to you. We should have asked. We should have. She paused and I saw tears in her eyes. We should have been better parents. The room fell silent. I don't need you to be proud of me now that you know the truth, I said quietly. I needed you to be proud of me when you thought I was a receptionist. I needed you to respect me regardless of my job title. But you couldn't do that. We can do better, Dad said. If you'll give us the chance. I looked at all of them, my complicated, difficult, judgmental family. The same people who had dismissed and belittled me were now standing in my living room, looking genuinely remorseful. "I have to go to the hospital," I said finally. "I have a patient in neuro ICU who needs monitoring. But I'm willing to have a real conversation. Eventually. When we can all be honest with each other." Mom nodded, wiping her eyes. "We'd like that. One more thing," I added, opening my door. "The next time someone tells you what they do for a living, believe them. And respect them. Regardless of whether it impresses you." They filed out slowly, each one stopping to apologize or say something conciliatory. David hugged me. Jennifer asked if we could have coffee sometime. Aunt Sarah promised to do better. When they were gone, I sat on my couch and felt the weight of 6 years of silence lift slightly from my shoulders. My phone buzzed, back on now, flooded with messages. But one stood out. "Dr. Martinez. Martinez. Chief, patient is awake and responding well. Full neurological function intact. You did it." I smiled and texted back, "We did it. Team effort." Then I grabbed my keys and headed to the hospital. I had a patient to see, rounds to complete, and a department to run. Being chief of neurosurgery didn't stop for family drama or media attention. But maybe, just maybe, the next family gathering would be different. Maybe they'd ask about my work, my research, my surgeries. Maybe they'd listen when I talked about the complexities of the human brain and the privilege of healing it. Or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe some things never change. But that was okay. Because I didn't become a neurosurgeon for my family's approval. I became a neurosurgeon because I loved the work, the challenge, the profound responsibility of holding someone's brain, their entire self, in my hands and making it whole again. And that was enough. Epilogue. 6 months later, I stood at the podium of the annual Chin family reunion, invited for the first time ever to give a speech about my career. Mom introduced me as our daughter, Dr. Emily Chin, Chief of Neurosurgery at Metropolitan Hospital. I talked about the brain, about the delicate work of surgery, about the patients whose lives I'd saved and the ones I couldn't save. I talked about the years of training, the sleepless nights, the constant learning required to stay at the top of my field. And for the first time, my family listened. After my speech, my youngest cousin, 8 years old, came up to me with wide eyes. "Aunt Emily, can I be a brain surgeon like you?" I knelt down to her level. "You can be anything you want to be. And when you achieve it, don't let anyone make you feel small. Not even family." She nodded seriously. "I won't." I looked up and caught Mom's eye across the room. She smiled at me, a real smile, not the sharp, performative one from before. It wasn't perfect. We still had work to do, conversations to have, old wounds to heal. But it was a start. And sometimes a start is enough.